Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have to say, when I went over to welcome the President to the podium here, he promoted me to private. Contrary to my introduction, our keynote speaker is an individual I know quite well, a fellow Marine. I'll tell one point on him. In March of 2004, as we kicked off to go to Baghdad, General Conway led the Marines all the way to Baghdad. So please join me in welcoming our 34th Commandant of the Marine Corps, James D. Conway.
Thank you. Please. Well, good morning, President, Mrs. Bush, distinguished visitors, and most of all, ladies and gentlemen. This 7th day of December is always a poignant day for Americans. Today it is even more so the case. We commemorate a day that enraged the nation and propelled the United States into a bloody 4-year struggle, from which we emerged the most powerful nation on earth. Today we rededicate a gallery of a national museum that depicts elements of our fight in the Pacific against a battle-hardened and fanatical enemy. We honor our 41st President and Commander-in-Chief today, both for his heroism in that campaign and for his tremendous service to this state and this country over the intervening years. Today, December 7th, 2009, Marines are in the attack in an operation called Cobra's Anger in the vicinity of Nowzad, Afghanistan. They face yet another fanatical enemy, but the men of the 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines have no doubt as to how their efforts will end. On a personal note, for my father, a World War II veteran, alive today, he and my mother would be celebrating their 63rd wedding anniversary. Ronald Reagan once remarked, "Freedom is always just one generation away from extinction. We do not pass it along in our bloodstreams to our children. It must be preserved and sometimes fought for by those who hold it dear." The generation born of the Great Depression held it dear. On the night of December 7th, 1941, young men lined up and slept in place outside Marine recruiting stations in order to be amongst the first to enlist on Monday morning. They believed the Marine Corps would be the first to take the fight back to the enemy in the Pacific, and history has proved them right. Hundreds of thousands of other young men across the country made similar decisions to place their lives on hold, to forego college or marriage, in many cases to give up a well-paying job in order to go to war. George Herbert Walker Bush was one of those men. He is, of course, a man of humility. He would say that the rage he felt in his chest over the Japanese attack was the same as every other red-blooded American that day, that he was just doing what most able-bodied men did, or certainly considered doing, that December. Perhaps he's right. And that's in part why they represent our greatest generation. But the war years shaped our future president like no other experiences could have. As the youngest naval aviator in the history of the service, he enjoyed the camaraderie and the flying. He shared the dangers and the hardships. He demonstrated immense personal courage. And he suffered the loss of friends and shipmates. Through it all, he maintained optimism and a larger sense of perspective on the job he was doing. In 1944, he wrote to his mother, "The Navy itself is great, but what we're here for is even greater." He has called his experiences from 1942 through 45 a sobering understanding of war and peace. That sober understanding is a quality we would pray God give all those elected to be our Commander-in-Chief. President Bush would, I think, be delighted to hear that today's naval aviators are still some of the cockiest people that ever wore a white silk scarf. I just returned from a visit to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iraq, where I heard a true story. The commercial guard frequency for the Persian Gulf is monitored in Dubai, UAE, and they recently recorded this conversation. Iranian air defense. Unknown aircraft. You are operating in Iranian airspace. Identify yourself immediately. Aircraft. That's a negative. I'm an American aircraft and I'm operating in Iraqi airspace. Iranian air defense. You are operating in Iranian airspace, and if you do not depart immediately, we will send up interceptors and shoot you down. Aircraft. This is a United States Marine Corps F-18 fighter. Send them up. I'll wait. Ladies and gentlemen, Ned and I have had a brief opportunity to walk around this magnificent museum, and those of you in the Nimitz Foundation and from the great state of Texas should feel very proud of your efforts here. The Stonemasons Guild of Brussels in the 18th century petitioned their king, who was about to commission a new structure. They wrote, "If you build it of wood, it will be light and airy. If you build it of brick, it will be large and stately. But if you build it of stone, it will last through the ages." Folks, you have built a museum that will last through the ages. It honors our World War II heroes, but will also inform, inspire, and educate generation after generation of young Americans, most of them not yet born. You have built a museum of stone. The museum is much needed.